Okay, so I know what you guys are thinking. Right, this has to be a joke. What do you mean green hits are OP? Why is this broccoli guy so hot? But your questions will be answered in this video, alright? So why would you ever green hit, right? Well, the answer is because green hits don't contribute to the yellow hit limiter. And so I have a couple UI on my screen here. There's a little helpful green circle, which I'm pointing to in my editing software, hopefully. And there's also some steam, purple steam, or magenta steam, however, that comes out of my hammer whenever I do a yellow hit, right? So like you can see that has appeared in various of my videos, but basically if you do that 3 times, you'll see the little meter deplete and the steam get thicker to tell you that the hammer is about to go on cooldown. Right, so the hammer goes on cooldown. There's the the helpful indicator down there for that as well. For those who don't know, I'm using the Thorn mod. You guys should get this. It's very, very useful. But yeah, that's the big deal, right? Is that green hits would not add to that. So, right, if I do yellow hit plus yellow hit, and then I do a green hit, you'll notice that it does not add to the yellow hit limiter. So the problem with green hits is that you need to be moving pretty slowly in order to get them. So if you look at the speedometer, right, where it says speed in the bottom left, you'll notice that it kind of like floats around between 0 and 20 units, and that's how fast you need to be moving to get a green hit. So the needle is kind of at the very top of little green on my hammer, and that will get you a green hit, right? The problem is that if you're in combat, it's really, really hard to get that green hit, right? However, there are a couple things that actually let us get green while accommodating for the fact that we may be in combat as we're trying to hit green, right? So, for instance, if you dash, that does not put you any higher than you're supposed to be, right? So if I were to go up here and slam, you'll notice the needle, right, slam goes all the way straight down to green. Now, the problem is that the way that the needle works, if you hit a high enough velocity, right, so if you hit red, there's a little decay period where it will not decay for about half a second, right? So if I hit red, for instance, right, you'll see that the little red flashes for a second, telling me that I'm still on red even though my speed hits 0, right? So that decay period really matters. You need to be able to get green and stay in green for about half a second in order for you to get the green value. Now, like I said with dashes, right? Dashes actually help to preserve green when you do hit green. So if I'm walking around, right, a dash will not interrupt that. So how do we get into combat? Now, I found 2 methods that actually use a couple things I've gone over in the past in order to get green consistently. So first of all, whip hops. That's what we're going to be using for today. To whip hop, simply whiplash and jump, right? You can whiplash and jump, and it will basically take you down to about 30 units per second or so in any direction if you're choosing, except backwards, right? So if you go backwards, you'll notice that you will very slightly hit green for a very brief period of time. Yellow will deplete, and it'll light up green for just a sec, right? So that's why I went over dashes. What you can do is you can whip hop and dash to preserve the green for just a little bit longer. The dash lasts about 1.2 seconds, 1.25, I don't know exactly how long, but it's a pretty sizable window in order to get that green value, considering that, if you know how to hit stop pump, basically, if you hit an enemy, right, you can pump during hit stop in that brief window where you are doing a yellow hit, right? So it's pretty much the exact same length, if I would say. There's also another method, which is actually a bit easier, but puts you at a little bit more risk depending on the enemy you're fighting, and that is to simply whiplash onto an enemy, and then stay there, right? You hit green for a pretty sizable amount of time. You can also whiplash and move back a little bit, right? And that also puts you at green. You don't want to move too far back because it puts you out of the range of the enemy. You can also just, move around the enemy in any preferred direction if you would like to dodge some projectiles or something like that. But that is another method to getting green. You can also, again, use dashes to prolong that green, right, if you ever need to. And if you're going to dash, you're usually going to want to do it to avoid damage, right? This is obviously far more consistent. If you're going to a gutter tank or something, you're not going to want to do something like that because he'll just punch you away, and you won't be able to sit next to him for half a second in order to get the green hit. Now, here's another question. Why would you rather green hit over something else, right? So you could also swap to another weapon entirely, but there are times where, for instance, especially with the pump charge jackhammer, you commit to a hit without knowing, okay, wait, this is going to put my hammer on cooldown. I don't want to do that, right? So a green hit might be useful in that moment. If you've already overpumped the hammer, for instance, you don't want to swap off the hammer. You want to get the hammer value. So what you can do is, like I said, aim for a green hit instead. So if you do 2 yellow hits, right? And then that puts you at 1 hit away from putting the hammer on cooldown. you can instead do a green hit retroactively, having known, okay, wait, I'm going to put my hammer on cooldown. This is mainly only really good with the pump charge jackhammer. With the core trick jackhammer, you have stuff where, like, you know, if you do 2 hits, you can already not add to the yellow hit limiter by hitting cores and stuff like that, and hitting rockets, right? Doing this doesn't add to the yellow hit limiter, so you don't really need to get that 3 damage from being up close. And then, you know, with the sawed-on, why you would rather just use the sawed-on shotgun at that point if you're really going to get that close and you have this weapon out, right? You would rather just put this thing, you know, on a red hit anyway, because if you mess around with it, you know, the sawed-on, and then it comes back, right? You let it set the cooldowns align pretty neatly, right? So, you know, you're usually going to want to be using this weapon to get red hits, because, you know, it gets a lot of really high burst value in very little time. So yeah, you would normally want to use it with the pump charge jackhammer. So yeah, just to recap, whip hop and dash will put you at green, like it said on the little needle, and then also whip hopping and just staying within proximity of the enemy, not doing anything, will also put you at green. So you might be asking, why do I have 5 virtues in front of me, right? So the main reason is to demonstrate something, but before I do that, I would like to show you guys something that I've gone over in my videos a couple times now. There's an easy one-shot with the pump charge jackhammer, right? If you just hit the virtue and then turn in a direction that will push it into the explosion, you will get an easy one-shot. Normally, you know, if you just hit it and pump, you won't do that because the virtue gets blasted out of the radius of the pump. So yeah, you need to do that little turn. Now, if there's ever a scenario where you want to kill 5 virtues, this is where a green hit might come in handy, because a green hit with an overpump, like I demonstrated earlier, will one-shot a virtue. And, you know, if I get a sentry in here as well, right? A blaster, that will also one-shot a sentry. So even if you're just doing chip to something, you know, like a mind flare, you can also use it to one-shot enemies like virtues and sentries, which can be extremely useful if they come in abundance. It's really, really nice in a lot of custom levels. Paying atrophy, I'm looking at you. You want to do very consistent one-shots against these enemies, and you don't want to burn the cooldown on the pump charge jackhammer because it's very good at killing these enemies. So with that in mind, I'll show you guys what I mean with these 5 virtues, how you can use green hits to offset the yellow hit limiter and prolong your yellow hit chains as much as possible, right? Right, there you go, something like that, right? You can basically put a green hit with an overpump in between your yellow hits, and you can get something like that where you're killing, you know, 5 virtues really, really quickly. With all of this in mind, right, you know, you might say, again, like, why would I green hit when I could do something else? But if you're an avid pump charge jackhammer user, you might know that pump caches exist, right? So what's a pump cache? Pump cache is simply when you hit an enemy, instead of doing a hit stop pump like that where you pump during hit stop, you instead pump after hit stop, right? Right? Which allows you to get something like a 1-second overpump like I just demonstrated, right? So with a green hit, because it takes 2 seconds to fully overpump the pump charge shotgun, what you can do is you can pump cache off of that very easily and get a 1-second overpump for the next hit, right? Just something like this, right? Right, so, I mean, you don't have to do the knuckle blaster like I did there, but the idea is that you're getting the overpump, and then in the next hit, you're getting a 1-second overpump. So it's 2 seconds plus 1 second. And conveniently, if we do the math, the 3-hit limiter lasts as long as 3 seconds before you do another yellow hit, and 2 plus 1 second is 3 seconds, so really the pump charge jackhammer benefits so much from this, you know, being able to do an overpump into another overpump. You can basically spam yellow hits. It just so happens to make the absolute most sense for this weapon, especially with how it's used. Now, you know, you don't always just have to do 2 pump charge hits beforehand, because, you know, there's a lot of style loss that can come from that. So you can, you know, do something like, right, that into a core jam, and then you could do something like an overpump, you know? And that just makes more sense that way. So that you can reap the most style you get from each weapon. But still, even after that, you do a pump cache off of a green hit, right? That easily very valuable. Now, there's one more thing that I didn't talk about that's actually pretty useful when it comes to understanding the pump charge jackhammer and how it interacts with stuff like green hits, right? A lot of people think that green hits do not have hit stop, right? So that you can't do a hit stop pump. Well, some people know this, but little known fact, the hit stop of a green hit actually lasts for about 0.05 seconds. It does exist, it is there. So you might not see it, but it is happening. I actually have a mod that lets me tweak the hit stop duration. So I've set the hit stop duration so that it lasts about 40 times longer. So if I do a green hit walking up to this virtue, don't even have to move, right? There is hit stop. And it lasts very, very short. It's about 0.05 seconds, as I said. But it does exist. And during this time, you know, lo and behold, you can add a pump to the hit stop, right? So as well as being able to pump cash off of enemies using green hits, and that being a good thing, you can also do hit stop pumps, although it's very brief. It is pretty hard to do, all things considered. You know, with a bit of practice, you can get very consistent at it. It's literally just letting go of left click and pressing right click, right? Jesus. So yeah, definitely practice all of these things because who knows, they might come in handy. More combos that can utilize this, right? Do a yell hit. You can do a hammer boost in between, and then, you know, they'll mold you right back to being able to do other sorts of combos like that, right? So yeah, small recap. The 2 ways you're going to want to do this, right? Whip hop into that, and, you know, doing a full whiplash pull into, you know, half-second wait time. Another concern someone might have is like, you know, why would you want to do a green hit instead of doing just, you know, a regular overpump? You know, something like this, right? Where you just overpump and purposefully miss to hit an enemy. Well, number one, you can't actually affect where, you know, medium enemies would go. So the explosion actually would do a lot less damage. But number two, you can actually heal off of doing a green hit. So like green hits actually heal for 30. It's a decent amount. But also whenever you hit an enemy with the explosion of a pump. So like for instance, you know, if you hit yourself, it lands directly on top of yourself. But if you hit an enemy, it will place the explosion on top of the enemy, right? And that oftentimes means that you can avoid taking the damage of the overpump entirely because you can't dash out of it, right? You have to spend, you know, more than one dash in order to do so. And yeah, you basically can't dash out of an overpump. So oftentimes it may be more valuable instead to, you know, use the overpump on an enemy because the pump is placed on top of the enemy to avoid taking damage. So yeah, in those situations where you don't want to waste an overpump and swap to a new weapon, a green hit will definitely suffice. This has been my video. Yeah, use green hits. They you know, they might just save your runs. Who knows? And yeah, thanks for watching. Join the Discord, subscribe, like the video, comment, join the Patreon. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.